Hi everybody, welcome to the channel. Thanks for clicking on the video to watch it. I'm going to be talking about the property called sustain today. And if you look at the physics of sound, if you look like it sounds on an oscilloscope, you see that there is what's called an attack, the beginning of the note, sustain, decay, and release. And so it creates an envelope of sound. And so like you see on an oscilloscope, when you pick a guitar note, poof, it pops up, and then you see it start to fade back down. And one of the things we like on guitar, property that we consider to be a positive one, is sustain. In other words, when you pick the note, boom, it blooms up like this, and then it holds the amplitude of the wave for a good long time before starting to fade out. And the release of the note is when you stop playing the note, but it fades down during that the attack, sustain, decay. The decay is when the sound kind of decays down in amplitude or in volume. So we want to try to keep that up as high as we can so the guitar will really sing for us. Now everybody has different requirements. If you're playing funk music or something, you want to have a nice, short, snappy kind of sound to it. You're not looking for sustain for something like that. But when you're playing blues or a lead or a solo and you're trying to basically emulate the properties of a human voice, which is sustained by the wind, by the breath that you're putting out, then you want to have a note that's going to carry on. And a human voice, as long as you've got air coming through, until you have to take a breath, you can sustain that note. Well, on a guitar, we don't have any breath coming in. We have to put in energy from our hands somehow. But the design of the guitar can make a big difference in the way that the guitar sustains. However, people go back and forth, and I see discussions like this on Reddit and other forums all the time about which guitars sustain better. In the end, you'll find that your hands are the biggest factor in making your guitars really sing and sustain. So let's talk about sustain. So I'm going to just play a D string here. There's a note. I'm just going to let that ring. The note's still going. I can still hear it. It may be off the level that the microphone can detect, but that went for a good long time. Let me try the low E string. So it sustains for a pretty long time. It's still going. I can still hear it. I don't know if it's still audible on the microphone. So a guitar that sustains a long time is kind of a nice thing. In the 1970s, when guitarists really started becoming conscious of how instruments would sustain, it was always kind of a battle between Fender Strats and Gibson Les Pauls. Guitars with drastically different construction. Strats have bolt-on necks, 25 and a half inch scale length, whereas Les Pauls are 24 3/4 inch scale length and a glued-in neck. Much heavier body on the Les Paul than on a Strat. And so it was perceived that Les Pauls would sustain longer, but many people said you could play faster on a Strat than you could on a Les Paul. I don't know that that was the case. It just depended on the individual player. And you watch somebody like Clapton, who played both Gibsons and Fenders over the course of his career, the guitar itself didn't seem to make a big difference in how he played. His tone varied between them depending on how much distortion he used in his amp, and of course the double coil pickups and single coil pickups and things like that. But just the physics of the guitar, pretty much, if you have good geometry where from the nut to the bridge, and you've got an unimpeded path for the string to vibrate in an elliptical shape, it vibrates more here. The string travels more here at the 12th fret than it does by the nut or by the bridge. So it creates an ellipse, an elliptical movement. So as long as you don't have any buzzing frets or something like that, there's nothing really to impede the string. So in the 70s, they got this idea, like from pianos. Pianos inside, if you ever look inside one, you have a big cast brass harp, right? And all the strings are drilled into that, and they're tuned up to pitch. And that massive weight of the harp makes it stable under all the thousands of pounds of string tension. But it also, because it's so heavy, when you hit a note on the piano and you have that sustain pedal down, that note will just ring and ring and ring and ring and ring, especially those low notes. Now, I'm not talking about the high plinky notes at the very top. But on the low end of the piano, you hit a note, boom, and it'll just vibrate seemingly forever. And so guitarists said, well, that's a good idea. So guitar makers started trying making guitars with really dense wood bodies, really thick wood bodies, really heavy. Ibanez and a couple of other manufacturers even tried things like embedding a brass block, like of bell material, like that you'd use for a piano harp, inside the body of the guitar, and then drilling the bridge down into that, or using brass nuts at the top of the neck here. Some manufacturers tried things like aluminum necks. Something that the idea was that to basically ground that so that there was no resonance other than just the resonating quality of the string. Then in the 80s and 90s, this went all the way to the opposite end of things, to lightweight bodies made out of like basswood and other materials, with Kahler tremolos and Floyd Rose tremolos, which are also very, very light, and lockdown tuners and things, to make an instrument that was really super resonant, thinking that would cause more sustain. Of course, during that period, people are using the really high gain Marshalls and the Soldano amps, and just the different Mesa Boogies and stuff that had super high gain stages in them. So the amplification changed a lot during that time as well. But you can see they went from one extreme, super, super heavy guitars that would break your shoulder, to carry them around, solid maple with a sustain block. The guitar would weigh like 8, 9, 10 pounds. Your shoulder would be tired from playing it for a 4-hour gig. And then going to the opposite end of things with these like Joe Satriani style, or Steve Vai style Ibanez's that were just light as a feather. So what makes the biggest difference? Well, really your hands do. So let's talk about that just a little bit. I'm going to compare two different guitars and let you hear, okay, this is a Strat style, and I've got one that's going to be more of a sort of a Les Paul style body with the glued in neck and the same scale length as a Les Paul. So just let you hear some of the differences. I'm playing right now with clean, with no effects. There's a little bit of reverb, I think, on, but now if I just pick this note and let it ring, okay, it fades out about there. Now when I do vibrato on it, I'm getting more ring time, because what I'm actually doing, the friction of the fret against the string acts kind of like a bow, and I'm imparting more energy into the string by shaking my hand anyway. If I go way up high here, the notes get really plinky, right? This guitar sustains pretty well, but those plinky notes, if I give it some vibrato, now I'm putting some energy into it, it sustains a little bit longer. So vibrato makes a good difference. So having a good vibrato technique, you can take an acoustic guitar and make it sustain. It's going to fade out eventually. It's just the nature of the guitar. So anyway, so in single coil configuration, skinny neck, this guitar is lightweight. I mean, it feels like it's made out of balsa wood. This thing is really super light, and it has a different tone because of those things. But sustain-wise, it plays pretty well. It's not an expensive guitar. This is a super cheap one. I think this one is just barely over like $120 or something like that. I got it online on eBay, and it plays great. I love this guitar. I had a really expensive G&L. I said, okay, well, I hardly ever played it anymore. I sold it to get something else because this guitar just had such a great tone and great sound. Now, you can add things to the guitar. Now, if I want to add some distortion, that's something that we do a lot. That increases the gain stage a little bit, makes the note carry on. If I want to really get aggressive with it, I can add some a real high gain, and there's some delay on there too. So with those things, I can make this guitar sustain a really good long time. So I'm going to change guitars. I'll be right back. Hang tight. All right, so the next guitar. This is kind of a Les Paul variant design. It's not arched on the top, but it does have a 24 4¾ inch scale length. It has the tipped back neck at about 13-degree angle rather than a straight neck with string trees. It has a 2-pneumatic bridge instead of a tremolo style bridge. Glued in neck, that's probably one of the biggest factors in the sound. There's a distinct difference between the sound that you get in a glued in neck and a bolt-on neck. But as far as sustain goes, let me just play a note here. I'll just play the open D string. Sustain's about the same length of time as the Strat one, maybe a little bit longer, because there's less energy lost between where the neck joint is. So the strings vibrate the neck and the body joint and kind of keep that energy going. Try another string. There's an unwound string. So it's not appreciably different than what the Strat was. Let me try the low E. So on the lower notes, yeah, you probably get a little bit more sustain on this particular body style. Now, this kind of sustain, though, really only makes a difference if you're playing open chords. You've got open strings ringing for a long time. If I start playing bar chords, maybe a little bit more. So it's sustain-wise, it's again not appreciably different. It feels like there is more sound there because I've got humbucking pickups instead of single coils, so the sound itself is thicker. That doesn't necessarily mean for more sustain until you start driving an amp. Let me put in some grind in there. Then it's like there's more frequencies going through. Sustain because the sound is thicker, but not necessarily the case. The notes aren't really lasting that much longer. Try a different pickup. So you see, it's not big. And if anything, on the high end, there's probably a little bit less sustain. Because the pickups aren't quite as bright. That makes a difference there. So if I go to my really super saturated tone here, but there's a ton of gain and there's a ton of compression on that. So compression is an effect you can use to get more sustain. It basically, as the sound drops down and decays down, the compressor boosts the volume up to give you a little bit more time, make the notes not fade out. It adds noise, which is a factor that you have to consider. Different types of fuzzes, delays can create more sound. A boost pedal can slam the front end of a tube amp and give you a little more gain and overdrive. But in the end, it's going to come down more to your technique, the ability to just take the string and just bow it like that to make it keep on ringing. So that makes a bigger difference. The weight of the guitar, the design of the guitar, only just modestly. And on a piano, yeah, the harp makes a big difference because the string is not being fretted. You know, you've got open strings that are just ringing, and if a guitar was like a harp where you're just playing notes and the notes are you just play one note at a time in sequence and that note's pitch never changes. But on a fretted instrument, it's going to change depending if you're playing a note here on the 3rd fret or you're playing a note here on the 15th fret. The sustain is going to be different. So it comes down to your technique more so than anything else. So if you want to have infinite sustain, one thing that you can do is go with one of these little puppies here. This is called an e-bow, if you've ever seen one of these. It's a magnetic string driver, like a bow. It's got a couple little tracks here you put over a couple of strings as a guide, and the string in between them will start to vibrate. Let me go here and put it on. I'm going to put it on the 4th string. What I'm going to do is you have to put this right behind your 1st fret. Kind of buzzes like a bee. But as long as I hold it there, that string will keep on vibrating. Try it on an unwound string. And this is a pretty cool effect. If you add this with some reverb and stuff, and let me try something here. Okay, I'm going to use like a volume pedal and then fade in the notes here. So as you can see, you can make notes sustain indefinitely with one of these. You can only do single notes on it. You really can't do chords, but with a delay, you can do some pretty cool things to make the notes kind of stack one on top of the other. So if you're really craving just like violin-like sustain, an e-bow is the way to go. There's also some pickups you can put into your guitar that are called Sustainiac, and they basically you should sacrifice a pickup in order to get the sustain thing. So you'll find them on Les Pauls or Strats, and then it's a little battery operated thing. You got to deal with like batteries inside your guitar and keep them, fresh all the time. So it's kind of its own thing. But like guys like Steve Hackett of Genesis and his with his modern group that does like Genesis Revisited stuff, that's a tool that he uses a lot. I think Robert Fripp uses one as well in one of his Tokai Les Pauls that he plays. So that is the thing with sustain. Again, play around with the stuff there. Just knowing the history a little bit about how they did the super heavy brass nut and brass block guitars in the 70s really did make a huge difference compared to the 80s and 90s, where they went the complete opposite way with super light resonant guitars. It comes down to your amp, it comes down to your pedals, it comes down to a lot of different things. Probably the weather affects the guitar in certain ways on certain days. The humidity and things like that would make a difference too. So, but your hands are the biggest factor in all of it. If you go to watch somebody like B.B. King or Clapton, or you watch Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, John Petrucci, any of those guys that are just really super good, it's all about what's in their hands. And their sound comes through their hands more so than their pedals, their guitar, their devices. You could probably take this guitar and give it to Joe Satriani to make it sound like Joe Satriani. If you take it and give it to Clapton, he's going to sound like Clapton. So your tone comes more from your hands than anything else. Well, anyway, we're just up right up against 10 minutes. I'm thankful that you joined me today, and hope you found this entertaining and informative. And if you did, click that like button and subscribe and share. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers this year. All right, so I am just under the 10-minute mark, and mission accomplished. Okay, guys, thanks for watching again, and we'll see you next time. Greg West out.